Hey YouTube, Reggie here with ReggieMoves. Tonight I want to talk to you about job costing. So, job costing is defined as the method of recording the cost of a manufacturing job rather than the process. With a job costing system, a project manager or an accountant can keep track of the cost of each job, maintaining data which is often more relevant to the operations of the business. Now, simply put, it's about tracking all the costs so that you know what type of profit margin you have at the end of a job. Now, just know that this isn't a 2-minute drill. So, the first time that I did this, I probably spent an hour or so on the job costing that we do to help us estimate jobs. On your operation, it may take more time, it may take less time, but the idea is about tracking all of your costs, not just a couple of your costs, so that you actually know really at the end of the day what that job or each job that you do is going to make. So I break down our jobs into 5 parts. The 5 parts that I use are the prep time and getting to the job, the load time, the getting to the offload, the actual offloading, and returning to the shop. So this can be done on a local move, this can be done on an intra-state or an interstate move, all a little bit different, but they're easy to break down in segments. You can break these down differently if it works for your operation a little bit better, but this is a way that has helped me break ours down to capture all the cost for each part of the move. You also have to think about fixed cost and variable cost in your moves. So fixed cost could be things like truck payment. Variable cost might be something like fuel expenses that vary with the amount that is going to be used on a job. The costs need to be thought about throughout the entire process of the move as well. So that begins in our operations from the very first phone call all the way to when the crew returns from a job and the final paperwork is being finished by the accountant or your bookkeeper. So that's kind of the whole life cycle that needs to be thought about. And don't skimp on any of this, because anything that you miss when you're doing this exercise is just going to come back and bite you in the long term. So make sure you spend some good time on this, and the better you can dial it in and the more accurate you can be, the better. You don't want to overestimate the cost of a job, because then you may lose out to competitors who are factoring their jobs a little bit better. But you also don't want to be underestimating the cost of your jobs, leaving money on the table, and hurting yourself in the long run as well. So that being said, let's move on. So anytime we're job costing, I start with and think about the morning prep time. So I think about weight tickets if they're necessary, fuel time, travel time in the morning. Don't forget that the crews may stop along the way. So if they're running to 7-Eleven, factor some time in for that. And any time that you're factoring for employees or wages, you want to think about the whole cost that your employees are going to have. So not only are you factoring the driver's wages versus the helper's wages, but you also can't forget about things like taxes that are going to be on top of that hourly rate. So let's say you've got a $15 an hour employee, then you can't just use $15 an hour as your cost. You have to factor in the entire cost, which includes any type of federal income, state income taxes, unemployment, things like that are going to add. And typically, at least the way I do it, and I would suggest you look at what in your average taxes that as an employer you're paying for your employees. But on average, if you were to use 15%, then you would cover yourself. So the way I do this is if you take your hourly rate, let's say you're $15 an hour, multiply that by 1.15, and that'll give you your actual total wage expense or wage cost that you need to be using when you're doing these exercises. Don't forget about I would guess that everybody's factoring the load time and the offload time and probably the travel time, but don't forget about the prep time in the morning. And if you're an over-the-road driver, or if you're sending crews out of town and you're not necessarily sending help with your crew or with your drivers, then don't forget to include some money in for your driver getting to and from the help location. So if you're picking up crews at another agent, then factor in the additional time that it would take for you to go pick up the extra crew, and or if you're going to get labor off site and they're going to drive to you, factor in the additional time that it would take, or fuel money to pay for your help as well. So you got to add those additional costs in. Now, once you've factored in your labor costs, you also want to think about other costs like lodging, per diem, if you've got weight tickets, if you've got tolls, any type of contract labor, etc. And you want to add those into your labor costs that you came up with before. You also want to factor in all the miles that your drivers are driving the trucks, and you must account for the total amount of miles that the trucks are going, not just a Google Maps what you're going to be house A to house B. So the crew's got to get there. Again, if they're stopping, you need to be able to track that. If you don't have a GPS, then I would suggest factoring in some additional miles, and make sure you've got the round trip factored in. You also want to factor in your truck expense. So it could be two different things. So if you own your own truck, then you would need to factor in any type of maintenance cost that you might have. If you own it outright and don't owe any money on it, most likely it's going to be higher mileage, because most people aren't buying a brand new truck with cash. Or you need to factor in your payments. So like I said before, if you have a payment on a truck, then you need to factor that in. And the way that I do it, so I'm going to factor in, let's say you've got a $750 truck payment, then you need to factor that over the course of the year, and you need to factor that based on an average mileage that you think that truck is going to run. Now, this can also be difficult sometimes, because if you have the newer trucks, you're probably going to run more. You might have an older truck though that doesn't run as much, but has higher mileage, let's say, and so the maintenance expense on these might be a little bit higher, but you're also not running the truck as much. So any type of mileage expense or cost that you're factoring would be slightly different than if you're running a truck with a payment on it that was going to have very little maintenance due on it. So in my example, let's say that I've got a unit that is going to average 40,000 miles, and I'm going to take that $750 payment and multiply it by 12 months, so you come up with $9,000 for the year that you're going to pay on that truck. Now I'm going to divide that by the 40,000 miles to come up with a mileage cost of 22.5 cents per mile. Now that's going to be the number that I'm using for my exercises. So anytime I'm working on estimating a job or trying to cost a job out, my truck expense for just the truck, now that doesn't factor anything else in, so I'll go into that in a second, but for just the truck expense, I'm going to factor in 22.5 cents per mile. So if it goes 1,000 miles, multiply that 1,000 miles times 22.5 cents a mile, and that's the expense that you need to capture in your move to cover that expense. Now, what do you think the next biggest expense in the job would be? So we started with our labor. That's going to be a large expense for a moving company, and then we have our truck expense at the 22.5 cents per mile. Now, what would be the next biggest expense you would think in terms of the truck? So a tire expense would be the next largest expense, or largest single expense that you're guaranteed to have, and moreover than a new engine, let's say, because a new engine we're thinking about maybe out in the 250, 350, 450,000 miles if it's a box truck. The tires, though, we know are maybe going to last 100,000 miles. So the way you would do this is you would factor in the total cost of a new set of tires, and you would divide it by the miles that you think that truck's going to go in a year. So for us, you always, or you should, want to factor in the cost of brand new tires. So you can go get cheaper tires, and you can go get cap tires. I understand that, but factor in brand new tires into your jobs so that you can buy brand new tires when it comes time to buy tires. The brand new tires are going to last longer, and they're going to save you money in the long run. One blown tire on the side of the road and a road call is going to cancel out any cost savings that you would have on a new tires. And I get it, when it comes time to buy a new set of tires, they're expensive. But if you're factoring it into your jobs already, then you should have built in that profit into the jobs so that when it comes time, you should have that money sitting in an account ready to spend for the new tires without any sweat off your back. So let's just say 6 virgin tires cost $250. Now, if that tire is going to go 100,000 miles because it's a brand new tire, you would take the 2,500 miles, divide it by 100,000 miles, and that would be 2.5 cents per mile. So anytime that truck turns, you want to factor in an additional cost of 2.5 cents per mile. And you could do this at any different cost. So if you factored in $4,500 for a brand new set of tires, let's say you want to go with a higher grade tire, brand new virgin tire, factor in $4,500, so 4.5 cents per mile, not 2.5 cents per mile, and you'll be covered when it comes time to purchase those tires. So next, I'm going to factor in fuel, and that's a little bit easier. That's a variable cost that can be factored in with the mileage. So I am going to say that right now the fuel cost is $3.15 per mile, let's say, on average. And all you have to do is divide that $3.15 by the miles per gallon. So, and we typically use 6.5 miles per gallon. So take $3.15 divided by 6.5, and that's 48 cents per mile. So that's actually another obviously higher expense in a per mile cost, but it can be factored into each job appropriately. So you may have a unit, let's say you're working a job that you're running a Sprinter van on, you're probably going to get higher than 6.5 cents per mile. So use the appropriate factor in that case. If you're running a tractor trailer, then obviously use the lower mileage. If you're running in the mountains, use whatever is appropriate in your situation. And these are just examples of numbers that I use, but again, the drill is not a 2-minute drill, and it's also not a kind of set it and forget it type of drill either. You want to factor these in per job and with the crews, with the equipment, with what you're using on that job to come up with an appropriate cost so that you know exactly how much you're making. Factor in other fixed and variable costs the same way, like insurance, IFTA, IRP. You could factor in heavy highway use taxes, permits, property taxes, maintenance, PMs, inspections, new ELDs, technology, any type of back office, etc. And just remember, what you miss now is going to affect you later. So if you think you want to add in some technology into your systems, then factor that cost in, because that's the only way that you're going to cover your jobs or know that your jobs are being covered, or that new technology can be covered by the jobs. Fixed costs like insurance, they can be divided by your estimated miles per year. We said in the example before, let's say that unit you're estimating to go 40,000 miles in a year. You would take the total cost of the insurance and divide it by that 40,000 miles, and that would give you a per mile cost that you could add in to your other cost. And so just remember, like I said before, that if any of these factors are wrong, then you get affected either way. So if you're factoring costs that are way too high and your competitors are not, then if you're using this as an estimating tool, then your estimates are going to be way too high. They're going to be covering costs that aren't really necessary to complete the job the way that you want it. However, if they're too low, then next year when it comes time to pay for something, you're not going to have factored in those costs, and therefore you're going to have to scramble or come up with money that wasn't built into any of the jobs over the course of the year. So in the example, let's say that we were factoring 40,000 miles, but let's say that you only go 10,000 miles. Well, that's a difference of 25% of the actual miles that unit went. So if you're using, let's say the 40,000 miles for your insurance, then you're gonna have not covered all the expense of that insurance, because you're basing your totals on the unit going 40,000 miles, but in reality it only went 10. So does that make sense? So I've written the numbers down to make it a little bit easier, but so let's use $1,500 as an annual cost for insurance for the unit. So I'm going to say, all right, $1,500 annually at 40,000 miles. The math is 3.75 cents per mile. But however, if that unit only goes 10,000 miles, then it's actually 15 cents per mile. So that's 4 times greater than the factor that we were using. And so on a 650 mile run, let's say, which is not very far at all if you think about round trip miles, on that 650 mile run, you would be missing about $73 in cost for that, just that one trip. So over the course of a year, if you did that for every single job, and this is why I said don't just sit it and forget it. If over the course of the year, you would actually be missing out on $1,125 in costs that actually did occur. So the insurance, just because you go less miles doesn't cost less. So the insurance is going to be what it is. And if you haven't factored that whole cost or that whole expense into your formula, then you're missing $1,100 real dollars. And I don't think that anybody really wants to do that, because next year you have to come up with that $1,125 that you were missing for your insurance. So it doesn't just magically appear. So again, don't fool yourself on this, because it is going to cost you. These costs are real costs, and they're going to happen whether you do your math right or not. I will say this though, don't let that scare you. Just let it tell you that it's important to keep track of this and continue to do it on a day-to-day basis. You don't have to change your math on a day-to-day basis for every single job. That's not what I'm saying, because there are some averages that you can come up with. However, when fuel costs go up, you need to factor that in. And if you recognize that the unit that you're running isn't going the estimated miles that you originally thought in the beginning of the year, change your math. Don't just factor it one time and think that you're set. Now, when coming up with all of your costs, please don't forget to save your work. So when you do this for yourself, save it so that you can come back and reevaluate your numbers, and that you know how you came up with your numbers. Because there's nothing worse than doing all the work, spending 2 hours, 3 hours on something that you put a lot of thought into, and then it's for nothing when you come back because you can't remember how you came up with the number. For the insurance, let's say you used $1,500, but you forgot why you used $1,500 in the first place. And if you forget, then it's hard to figure out why you came up with that 3.75 cents per mile or the 15 cents per mile. Those are drastically different numbers, and it would be hard to remember why you came up with what you came up with. Some of these costs are going to change obviously more than others. I would suggest at an absolute minimum to look at obviously the annual cost. So the truck payment, if you know what your truck payments are, then those are pretty standard. However, eventually the truck payment goes away. So you should look at a lot of these at a minimum of once a year. And then the other things like fuel costs, things like that, I would suggest that on a daily or weekly basis that those be updated or checked by somebody in the office that has their finger on the pulse. Insurance and maintenance, these things, well, let me take a step back. This process of job costing is going to help anybody in your office, whether it's your managers, whether it's the people that are doing your estimates, or anybody that's in the office trying to track how each job's being done. It is going to help them tremendously in knowing and feeling confident in the work that they're doing, that what they're doing is correct. So if you have kind of a okay system, or if you are just going by gut and knowing that, well, we've been in business for 5 or 10 years, and so if we've made it this far, then we should be all right. how much better would you feel if you knew 100% based on math that the money that you were making was money that was profit, an actual profit, not just like, yeah, I think this will work type deal. Because I guess for me, anytime that you need to bring somebody new in, if you had to train them, they don't have the experience that you have. They don't have the 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of experience that tells them, oh, this will be the right way to estimate a job, etc. You have to give them a tool so that they know and they can feel just as confident as you do that the estimates that they're providing come out correctly and will provide the correct amount of profit that your business and their business needs. One of the good things that I've found about doing this as well is, especially for the household goods industry, as we all know, that there's a peak season, and it's right now June, July, August, and it's kind of ramping up in that April, May time. But let's be honest, in the December, January, February time frame, when we all know it's slow, we do what we can to keep our crews working and busy to get us through until it gets back to the busy season. So what better of a way so that when you're estimating a job, if you know exactly what your costs are, and again, I didn't mention this before, but you need to factor in your overhead. You need to factor in keeping the lights on, heating the building, keeping the AC on. If you've done that and you know all of your expenses or the costs that are needed per job, then you can send a crew out, 100% cover your costs, not necessarily make a profit, but know that you're covered. And in the slower months, when that happens, if you know that you're covering all your bases, how much better of a feeling would you have to know that you can pay all of your employees and you can pay all of your bills, and hey, you're not making any profit, let's say, however, you're covering everything, and it'll get you through until you can get back into a place where you're making good profit in the summer. It's something that we do. You don't have to do it on every single job, but there are times that we all know that you're fighting, you're competing against somebody else to get the work, and if they lowball the job and you really want the work, then sometimes knowing exactly what your costs are going to be, you can come in at a discounted rate from your original estimate and maybe get that job back by coming in at a rate where you know you're covering yourself, versus if you just think, well, we can't do this job because we're going to lose money, but you don't really know that for a fact, then in my opinion, I'd much rather get the work, keep the crews busy throughout the slower months, and move ahead until we can get back into the March, April, May time frame. And you don't have to overcharge, you don't have to undercharge. You can charge just the right amount by doing this. Hey, if you like this video, please send me a comment, like the page. I'd like to hear some more from you guys, and ladies, if you're watching, I am going to be doing some more of these, so please subscribe. I'm going to be talking about anything household goods and even some freight related topics such as estimating, sales skills for your sales employees, valuation premium. I'd like to talk about some SIT, military rates and how military work is handled. I'm going to talk about tariffs, things like that. So anything that you guys have, if you want to hear more of, I'd be glad to hear about it. And again, please like, please subscribe. Thanks for listening to me. Hope everybody has a good night, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you.